You with Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio live stream. I've looked at a number of statistics on the breakdown of racial groups, assuming they're accurate, by the way. And there's very little, I believe now, on things and reports and studies that come out, particularly if the government or an organisation that relies on government revenues comes up with these numbers. It's most likely going to be politicised in some way, rather than just the real accurate information as it once was. So here's a breakdown of the racial groups and genders in the United States. This is in larger organisations. As you go through this report, they say it's organisations with 5,000 or more employees, but a few pages later they say it's 10,000 or more employees. So I've noticed that they do a double counting. For example, Hispanic people are called white in certain areas of the report, but then they go back to being Latino in another area of the report. So it's whites only, then Latinos and whites and so on. So it's a little bit hard sometimes. You have to go back over in order to get accurate information. You've got to go back and sort of almost tease out or extrapolate various numbers for the jumping around that they do, as I say, counting Latinos as white in one side, but then putting them out as a separate category in another. So anyway, we're assuming larger organisations here in the United States. Now, in the top level of executives, and I think here they mean, again, it's not fully classified, but they've got a category of top level executives, then senior managers. So, and now looking at the numbers overall, it can't be just C-level, as in chief CEO, chief financial officer, chief operations officer, or executive vice president, that sort of thing. It's a little bit vague on that, and I think they purposefully do it like that so that they can say, no, we didn't mean that. What we really meant was, if they get called up on anything or called out on anything. So the top level executives, anyway. So we'll assume this is C-level and VP, I guess you could. 44% of the top level executives are white. Now, they don't do an additional gender breakdown at this point. So now, if we assume that based on the claims, at least, and I don't believe they're accurate, based on the claims, 65% of the population of the United States is white. I believe it's less than that, but let's just run with that for the moment. And again, I'm not sure whether they're including some or all Latinos in this. So 44% of the top level executives are white. Now that means whites are heavily underrepresented, because if 65% of the population is white, but only 44% of the top level executives are white, then white people, the indigenous, if you like, in modern history, the indigenous population of the United States, white people are hugely underrepresented. Now, what's also interesting here is how the minority groups, black people, for example, now supposedly the black population in the US is give or take 13%, or 12% in some studies, and they represent about 16% of the so-called top-level executives. So blacks are overrepresented. So if you look at, say, in terms of academic achievement, all these sorts of things, black students and black people are underperforming hugely in those areas, and yet they're overrepresented. So this is a clear indication, in my view, at least, about affirmative action and diversity, DEI hiring, that black people being the lowest performing and lowest capable group in the US, highest crime rate, all that sort of stuff. Certainly, if we look at the FBI stats and so on, then why are they so heavily overrepresented? So you would think, on balance, that they would be underrepresented, given that they're a low-performing group generally, but instead they're overrepresented. So we can assume from this that affirmative action and diversity, equity, and inclusion are on steroids and on speed, are just running at insane levels, that they should be not only equally represented on proportion of population, but overrepresented by 30 to 40%, depending on your numbers there. So that's quite astonishing. So whites are heavily underrepresented at that level. Black people are heavily overrepresented at that level. Now, the Hispanic component is, again, they break it out, so you put Latinos in and out of the white category. But if we extrapolate out a separate category, the Hispanic thing is probably about what you'd say the Hispanic Latino population in the US. It's pretty close. And then you look at Asian groups, such as Chinese and Indians, and they appear to be, from what these numbers at least, overrepresented. So the only group in the US that's underrepresented in top level executives is white people. Now, further on the at this study, there's they bring out the issue of gender, but again they bury it and conceal it in other numbers, and then switch the equation around again, including Latino, not including Latino, and so on. Then they break it out again in terms of college and not, lower college, advanced college, and so on. People have PhDs or don't have PhDs. So, but if I sit down and filter the numbers and play around with the stats and they're trying to bury information in this rather than indicate it, then we see that women as a group, in terms of women in the workforce, are overrepresented, and men are under. So the group that's the most underrepresented in the top level executive category is straight white men. There are various subsets of this that talk about LGBTQ employment, things like that. But the only group that's heavily underrepresented is straight white men in a country that has a straight white male majority, where straight white men are running the government in all places pretty much, where it seems impossible for this to happen, that straight white men in charge are vigorously, aggressively, and purposefully forcing straight white males out of executive employment and replacing them with black lesbians and so on. So this to me is absolutely extraordinary. Now, in terms of the senior managers, and this we're talking sort of, say a junior VP, or I don't know, operations manager, VP of operations, a national sales business development manager, those sort of roles. So senior managers. It's running out at about the same. Now, there are more jobs in this category than there are in the top level, but 46% as opposed to 44% of senior managers are white. But again, once you do the breakdown, and they do a double count again with Latinos here, but once you do the breakdown, take out the female components and look at the again, you see straight white males are astonishingly underrepresented. If you take the view that the straight white males are, just as a category, say 33%, 32%, give or take of the population, then we're looking at 19% of senior managers are straight white males, as opposed to 32%, give or take, of the population. So again, straight white males are the only underrepresented category. And now, if you took out sort of female employment or recalculated female employment to be as it was, say, in 1970, then straight white males would be around about representative of the population. So we can see that the amount of jobs, even though it's increased overall, but on a relative basis, the only losers from globalization, the only people that are doing poorly out of it are straight white males, which is why the globalists pursue them so viciously and call them far-right Nazis and so on. They have to neutralize the voices of the genuinely disenfranchised, which, based on this, is straight white men. Now they call the professional class. I don't know what that means. Professional people that don't have sort of managerial responsibility or supervisory responsibility, such as, say, accountants, maybe doctors, that sort of thing, and scientists. So they're 68% white, and this is the category where, in the overall scheme of things, white people are the better represented, or closer to, if you like. So 68% white, and also around 68% straight white males. So if you look at that, that's the only category where I could find where straight white males are overrepresented or approximately represented. If you recalculate that to reflect the amount of people who get advanced degrees and PhDs and that sort of thing, and recalculate that, then given the amount of white people that have those qualifications, then white people are again underrepresented. So 88% of the the STEM type degrees in this area, until recently when they started really hammering it with political, gifting degrees to black lesbians and so on, then the amount of straight white males with those degrees, and then the amount of employment for straight white males, then straight white males are underemployed relative to their holding of qualifications. If you eliminate that and just look at it as a class, then you could say, well, straight white males were overrepresented, but not so. Compared to qualifications, they're underrepresented. Are they overrepresented and people get PhDs? White people? Well, yes, but that's not an overrepresentation. That's people that can meet a high standard of education. That's hardly the same as overrepresentation, in an ideological sense at least. Now, do the reverse around where, say, look at entry-level roles like toilet cleaners, sweep, street sweepers, or people delivering pizzas or something like that. Then white people take up about 10% of those jobs, and a majority of straight white males. So 90% of those jobs are taken up by recent migrants, black, brown people, third world peasants, and so on. So white people are underrepresented in that category. So this is an interesting snapshot. I'm surprised this doesn't get more coverage. I'm surprised more people aren't climbing all over this and picking apart the numbers. It's not easy to do. Again, as I say, you've got to really look at how they're presenting each set of numbers and then drill down as to what they're doing with these, and it's not easy. But anyway, that's the thing. So just in summary, straight white males are the only group that are underrepresented in the best paying, prestigious jobs in America, and this is reflected, by the way, all across the Western world at the moment. Now, the people say, well, look, the president of the United States is a straight white male. There you go. Every straight white male is therefore the president. Well, that's interesting logic. It's the same sort of logic that Beethoven was deaf. Therefore, all fantastic symphonies are written by deaf people. Nothing. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.